She had been following Middle Eastern politics for 3 decades, but the phone call, in March 2020, still caught her off guard. The voice belonged to a senior Emirati diplomat she had known since the Oslo Accords, a man who had spent years carefully avoiding any public association with Israel. His name was Ahmed al-Mansouri, though that was not the name on his diplomatic passport. For 20 years, he had been one of the UAE's most skilled intelligence operatives, a man who understood the shadow networks that really governed Middle Eastern politics. "We want you to document something," he said quietly from his office in Abu Dhabi, the secure line crackling with encryption. "Something that will change how the world understands this region forever." What he revealed over the next hour shattered every assumption about Middle Eastern alliances that had guided Western policy for 70 years. The Abraham Accords, signed that September, were not a sudden breakthrough of diplomacy. They were the public unveiling of a shadow network that had been operating in secret for nearly 2 decades. Israel had not just survived in a hostile neighborhood, it had systematically converted its enemies into partners, one covert operation at a time. This was not the Middle East that appeared on CNN or in the pages of Foreign Affairs. This was a parallel universe where Saudi pilots trained with Israeli instructors at undisclosed facilities in the Negev desert, where Emirati intelligence officers shared real-time surveillance data with Mossad operatives tracking Iranian weapons shipments, where Bahraini banks quietly financed Israeli technology companies through shell corporations registered in Singapore and the Cayman Islands. The old map of Arab-Israeli hostility had become as obsolete as the Cold War, but somehow the world kept reading from the old script. Al-Mansouri had witnessed this transformation firsthand. In 2008, he had been part of a secret delegation that traveled to Tel Aviv under cover of a medical conference. The official purpose was to discuss regional security threats. The real agenda was to establish the first formal intelligence sharing protocol between the UAE and Israel. "We were terrified, Jeb," he would later confess, "not of the Israelis, but of our own people finding out. The political cost would have been devastating." The transformation had been so quiet, so gradual, that even seasoned observers missed it. But for those who knew how to look, the signs had been there for years. In 2010, Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak made an unprecedented statement that went largely unnoticed by Western media. Speaking to a closed-set session of the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, he declared that Israel's greatest security threats were no longer Arab armies, but non-state actors like Hamas and Hezbollah, backed by Iran. What he was really saying, without saying it explicitly, was that Israel and the Sunni Arab states now shared the same enemies. The transcript of that session would remain classified for 8 years. This realization created what intelligence analysts would later call the enemy of my enemy paradox. Iran's rise as a regional hegemon, accelerated by the 2003 American invasion of Iraq and the 2007 Arab Spring, had fundamentally altered the strategic calculus of every Sunni monarchy from Riyadh to Abu Dhabi. The Islamic Republic was no longer just Israel's problem. It was expanding its influence through Shia proxy groups in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, creating what Israeli strategists called the Ring of Fire and what Saudi analysts termed the Shia Crescent. Suddenly, these kings and emirs faced an uncomfortable truth. They had more to fear from Persian Shia expansion than from Jewish democracy. The first cracks in the old order appeared not in diplomatic cables, but in cyberspace. In 2010, the Stuxnet virus attacked Iran's nuclear facilities with a sophistication that suggested advanced state-level cooperation. While the operation was publicly attributed to Israel and the United States, intelligence sources later revealed that Gulf states had provided crucial logistical support. Saudi Arabia had allowed Israeli aircraft to use its airspace for reconnaissance flights over Iran. The UAE had facilitated the insertion of malware through its extensive business networks with Iranian companies. Kuwait had provided safe houses for operatives moving between Tehran and Tel Aviv. This was hybrid warfare in its purest form. Not armies marching across borders, but an invisible coalition operating through proxies, front companies, and layers of plausible deniability. Israel had discovered that in the 21st century, the most effective alliances were the ones that never officially existed. They were partnerships built in the gray zone between war and peace, alliances that could be activated when needed and denied when convenient. The technology sector became the perfect laboratory for this new form of cooperation. Israeli companies, world leaders in cybersecurity and surveillance technology, needed new markets. Gulf states, flush with oil wealth but lacking indigenous innovation, needed technological sophistication. The result was a network of joint ventures, investment funds, and research partnerships that created bonds far stronger than any treaty. When Dubai's DP World acquired Israeli port security technology in 2016, it was not just a business transaction. It was strategic integration. When Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund began investing in Israeli startups through intermediaries in 2010, it was buying into Israel's technological future. But perhaps the most revealing moment came in 2018, when Israel's then Defense Minister, Avigdor Lieberman, made an extraordinary public statement. Speaking at the annual Herzliya Conference, Israel's premier security gathering, he declared that Israel had more in common with moderate Arab states than with some European allies. The room fell silent. Here was an Israeli official openly acknowledging what had been whispered in intelligence circles for years. The old alliances were dead, and new ones were being born in their place. European delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while Arab attendees, present unofficially, nodded in quiet agreement. The assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in January 2020 marked the moment when shadow cooperation became open alliance. Within hours of the American drone strike that killed Iran's most powerful military commander, intelligence began flowing between Tel Aviv, Riyadh, and Abu Dhabi with unprecedented transparency. Real-time satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and human intelligence reports moved through secure channels that had been established years earlier. The message was clear. Iran's primary military architect was gone, and his regional proxy network was vulnerable. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated this transformation in unexpected ways. As traditional diplomacy moved online and international travel ground to a halt, informal channels became the norm. Zoom calls replaced embassy meetings. WhatsApp groups connected officials who had never met face-to-face. In this digital environment, Israeli and Arab officials found themselves working together on everything from vaccine development to supply chain management. Geographic distance became irrelevant. Ideological differences seemed less important than practical cooperation. The psychological barriers began to crumble. A generation of Arab leaders had grown up during the peace process, not the 1967 war. For them, Israel was not an alien implant in the Middle East, but a regional neighbor with superior technology and shared security concerns. Round sum. Prince Mohammed bin Zayed of the UAE, barely 40 years old when he began his rise to power, saw Israel not as an ideological enemy, but as a strategic asset. His pragmatic worldview, shaped by Harvard Business School, rather than Nasser-era pan-Arabism, made cooperation not only possible but inevitable. The breakthrough came when these leaders realized that public opinion had evolved faster than official policy. Polling across the Gulf states showed that younger Arabs were far more concerned about economic opportunity than Palestinian solidarity. Social media influencers in Dubai were already promoting Israeli tech companies. Business leaders in Riyadh were quietly attending Israeli conferences. The normalization agreements did not create these relationships. They simply acknowledged what already existed beneath the surface of official rhetoric. The signing ceremony on the White House lawn in September 2020 was remarkable not for what it achieved, but for how anticlimactic it felt. The real work had been done years earlier in conference rooms in Abu Dhabi, in intelligence briefings in Riyadh, in joint training exercises that never made the newspapers. The Abraham Accords were not a diplomatic coup. They were a coming-out party for relationships that had been developing in secret for nearly 2 decades. This new Middle East challenges every assumption that has guided Western policy for decades. The Arab-Israeli conflict, which diplomats once considered the region's central organizing principle, has been relegated to a sideshow. The Palestinian cause, which once unified Arab public opinion, has been superseded by more immediate economic and security concerns. Iran, not Israel, is now seen as the primary threat to regional stability. Israel's success in converting enemies into allies offers a template for other regional powers. It shows that patient, sustained engagement can overcome seemingly insurmountable historical grievances. It demonstrates that economic interdependence creates political possibilities that military force alone cannot achieve. Most importantly, it proves that the most durable alliances are built not on shared ideology, but on shared interests. The old Middle East was defined by the logic of zero-sum competition, where one side's gain necessarily meant the other's loss. The new Middle East operates according to the mathematics of mutual benefit, where cooperation creates value that can be shared among former enemies. Israel did not just survive in a hostile neighborhood, it rewrote the rules of the neighborhood itself, transforming a region defined by conflict into a network of pragmatic partnerships. And in doing so, it created a new model for how small states can not merely survive, but thrive in an uncertain and dangerous world.